Welcome to the Internet History Podcast. I'm your host, Brian McCullough. As some of you have noticed, I've been trying to expand our scope just a little bit in this podcast so that we can cover contemporary companies and technologies as well as historical ones. This is not to say that I'm abandoning the historical focus of the show. We have episodes with the inventor of podcasting and a pioneer of the CD-ROM era coming in subsequent weeks. But basically, I don't want to have to wait for things to become historical, in quotes, before getting a chance to analyze them here. We did this a few weeks ago when we took a look at SoundCloud. And we're going to continue that today with a look at an up-and-coming company, Giphy. So please enjoy this conversation with journalist Nicole LaPorte, who recently profiled Giphy for Fast Company magazine. Nicole LaPorte, thanks for coming on the Internet History Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So I wanted to talk to you about your great article in Fast Company called "In 6 Seconds, Giphy Could Be Making Billions." And actually, this is sort of a hack first question, but I need to do it. How do they pronounce it? Is it Giphy or Jiffy?
I was just going to correct you, and
Aha.
Don't take it personally.
Yes.
It is actually still up for debate, but the official pronunciation is Giphy, so it's a hard G. But just the GIF itself, I mean, when these originated quite a while ago, like in the 90s or something, they were originally called GIFs. And then at some point it turned to GIF, so it is a totally valid question. But the hard G, it's Giphy.
All right. So, well, I mean, that makes sense because there's Jiffy peanut butter, so I suppose they might run
we
into
do
trouble
not
there.
want to confuse. We don't want brands to overlap, definitely.
Well, all right, because this was a company that was sort of amorphous to me before I read this article, like, tell us just a little bit about what Giphy does. Like, even from, not the business angle, but like, if I'm a user, what am I using Giphy for?
So Giphy is basically the preeminent company or brand that trades in GIFs. And GIFs are these little, I'm sure you've seen them or been sent them over email or, in text messaging, but they're these little 3-second loops of video that are, someone shrugging or giving a high five or rolling their eyes. It could be a GIF. Giphy does a lot of these, uses a lot of entertainment content. So it could be a really funny Simpsons clip of Bart doing something, funny or sarcastic. So it's these tiny little clips of video. They're typically 3 seconds long, and people use them to communicate. They send them in text. They send them over email. Instead of, sending an email back saying, great, after you just set up a time for a call, you could be much more amusing and search through Giphy, which is basically, I should back up and say, so it's basically a search engine that has all of these millions of GIFs on it. So you can go on to Giphy.com and you can search for LOL, or you can search for thanks or thumbs up or eye roll, and then scroll through many, many, many of these and find the one you want and send it to, a coworker or a friend or whatever. And they also create something called the Giphy keyboard that you can upload onto your phone, and then you can kind of talk while you're messaging. You can toggle onto that keyboard and search and scroll for GIFs that way, and then just easily, send them on your through iMessage. So it's a means of communication, and I needless to say, it's most popular with the young folks. I will say, aging myself. So, I think, 20-somethings and younger are just doing this all day long. I find the older older than that, it's less a routine thing. But yeah, so that's what Giphy does.
Is there a creation component as well? Can I use them to create new GIFs?
Yeah, they actually have a tool. They have a Giphy camera, so you can create your own GIFs. I have not used it, so I cannot walk you through this. But yeah, they created a tool to make them yourself. And a lot of, it's actually interesting. A lot of the GIFs on their site are user generated. And in fact, I talked to someone at Bravo, the company behind the Real Housewives franchise. And I was, and that show, people love, there are tons and tons and tons of Real Housewives GIFs because the show lends itself so well to these kind of, reaction shots and eye rolls and bitchy takedowns and whatnot. And yeah, the executive there told me every single GIF, Real Housewives GIF on Giphy is actually created by users. So yeah, people kind of will watch TV shows and like start uploading and creating these GIFs in real time and get them on the site, or, watching the Emmys or watching, a live event, and they'll just create them themselves. So yeah, you can actually do it yourself.
Well, so what really blew me away is, a couple data points from your piece is that apparently 300 million people see a GIF from Giphy every single day, which is triple from December 2016. And that there are more than 2 billion GIFs shared a day across Giphy through its many platforms, which we'll get into a second about how they distribute across like Facebook, Twitter, and all that stuff. And they're valued by investors at 600 million, and I don't know, they've got dozens and dozens of employees. So like this is quietly out of nowhere, like sort of a huge deal in social media, but also in advertising that we'll get into. What's the story of like the foundation of the company, the founding idea? It's Alex Chung and Adam Liebensong. Do they have tech or advertising backgrounds, or both?
Yeah, kind of both. They're interesting. They're, and I kind of make this point in the piece, they're not your typical startup, 20 something, dropped out of college, kind of wildly arrogant and going to go, change the world overnight. They're older. They're, not that old. They're early 40s. And they've been around the block. Alex, the co-founder, worked at Viacom for a long time in music licensing, and that's where he really sort of, I think, absorbed entertainment and the value of entertainment. And then Adam worked in advertising for a long time. So they're sort of interesting in that it is a startup. It's a very young company. It's 4 years old, but both, the guys running it have been around and have really thought very methodically, I think, about what the company is about, where it's going. And, we can get into this, but how they've built it has been very, very thought out and again, yeah, just very methodical. But yeah, they've had experience. I think Alex at one point, decided to be an entrepreneur and started a Facebook-like social media platform. And, you quickly realize that if you're not Facebook, it's probably not worth doing this. And then he turned to Giphy. So yeah, very experienced. And again, not the typical, young Snapchat type, evolution story that happened, super early in their 20s and quickly overnight. Again, older, a little bit older and more, I guess, more mature, I'd say, leaders who have a lot of experience.
Well, to get into the methodical, as you say, strategy here. So I think they're founded or launched 4 years ago or something like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And they essentially start by doing what is, again, not the typical way of they ask for permission first. They start by going platform to platform, trying to, Facebook initially didn't support GIFs, but they're trying to seed around this distribution. But then they're also going to the rights holders first too, to nail down. Talk a little bit about that, because since they do this first, they're actually able to get the rights holders to play ball, because they're not a major force when they start talking to the Hollywood people.
Yeah. And the way they described it to me, and I don't remember if this quote actually made it in, but they talked about it as a ladder, and they sort of realized very quickly that there's content and there's distribution, and it's sort of a ladder that you have to keep building. And the more content you get, the more distribution you can get, because, if you can go to Facebook and Twitter or whoever and say, hey, we've got Broad City, we've got this HBO show, we've got The Simpsons, the distribution folks are going to be happy. And then you go back to the content folks and you say, hey, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and they're happy. So they just realized very early that was a strategy, that those two forces, they had to kind of keep going back and forth between the content and the distribution, and that the more they could get of one, they could then get more of the other. And so, yeah, and the other thing is, I think Alex, because he'd worked in music at Viacom and kind of had come to this from an entertainment background, really saw, he always saw Giphy as the entertainment piece was always key for him. He really saw the value of, taking entertainment, TV shows and movies and splicing them up, and that would just be, it's almost to create its own entertainment platform, and something we haven't talked about yet. But he also sees Giphy as, Giphy.com as an entertainment destination where you could kind of go and just, spend 10 minutes, spend 20 minutes just scrolling through these very entertaining GIFs, which I have done, and it absolutely is entertaining. So anyway, they quickly, early on came out to Hollywood and started just meet and greet and explaining to the studios and the networks what Giphy was, and offered, to help, take the shows, splice them up, help them set up Giphy pages, in this kind of quid pro quo agreement, and then, sort of get all of this content out to places like Facebook and Twitter, iMessage. I mean, they're on everything. They're on Zendesk, which is kind of funny. They're on Tinder. It's very, very popular amongst the Tinder users. But yeah, so the sort of the content distribution piece was their first. That was kind of like step one, I guess.
Well, how do the rights work in the sense that it sounds like from your piece that they have nailed down a lot of people, but like, what if someone posts, I don't know, a Judge Judy eye roll, and Judge Judy is not on board? Like, do they have to take it down? Like, how have they figured out just sort of the mix of the rights if they don't have everyone in the universe signed up?
Yeah, well, the rights holders have final say in what goes up, so they can ask to take things down. So there's that. I guess that's the protection that Giphy offers them. So they have final approval. So even Giphy could go to HBO and say, as far as I understand this, we're going to, show them 10 GIFs they want to put up, and HBO might say, we like 8, we don't like those 2. And they actually do have the final say.
That's interesting. That's an angle I hadn't thought of. It's sort of like giving them a layer of protection or control over this sort of social media creation.
Well, it's a very, and it's kind of it plays into the quid pro quo situation, because there's no money being exchanged at this point. So I think that's the, that makes the content folks feel comfortable and okay with it.
Well, so how are they making money? I think it's Alex in the piece is quoted as saying, we know we can be profitable in a month if we wanted to. So if they are generating revenue, is it right now mostly you go to HBO, you say, hey, let's work together. We'll put up a Game of Thrones page on Giphy, and here we'll have all these great Game of Thrones GIFs. Is that sort of like HBO would pay them to do that?
Yeah, there's no, the HBO's not paying them now. I mean, and the big, when he talks about, we could make money in 6 seconds, I think they are now working on trying to figure out an advertising model that the reason it could be so huge is just that the online advertising market is in such despair right now, and everyone hates banner ads. Everyone's trying to figure out how to make online advertising palatable, and Giphy is sitting on all of this content that they can get into text messages. They can, and that brands can. I talked to the Lego guy, and Giphy could potentially tell them what context people are using Lego gifts in, and if they're feeling happy or sad, and on top of which, no one has really figured out how to get advertising into messaging, which is just the most intimate and immediate space. And Giphy feels like they are sort of ground zero for this, because they have all this content. They're on all of these platforms. That if they can kind of figure out an an ad model that it makes brands happy, they could, and that consumers are fine with, that they have this kind of easy access, into this new platform. And the second part of that is that, 6-second ads are kind of what everyone's talking about. And they're like, hey, we already do this. We basically do 3 seconds. Some of the GIFs are already 6 seconds long. So we're sitting, we're kind of the turnkey way into 6-second online advertising.
That's part of this that I found so fascinating. This is almost like the 9th degree level of advertising targeting, because one of the two founders says something along the lines of, we can help the brands sort of understand if their brand is synonymous with like happiness or maybe subversiveness, like your gifts are being posted as sort of like, see, I got one up on you or something. So like it's almost like advertising against mood, or it's not just advertising against intent of the conversation, but it's like, hey, Coke, your brand is being used as sort of like, it's Friday, relax, have a Coke, or sort of, and so that level of understanding about the psychology of how their brands are being used is like, that's unbelievable.
Yeah. No, exactly. And that's what they want to trade on. And I think that, you could foresee, a future where, Coke says, when someone texts the word happy, or if Budweiser says, if someone texts the word Friday night drinks, we want to be the first gift that they see. I mean, that's very easy for them to do at this point. And other companies are already starting to do that. So yeah, it's really interesting. And then, for smaller players, if Budweiser's doing that, then and you're a rival, alcoholic beverage company, you don't want to be edged out, so then you're going to pay. So I think they know what they're sitting on here, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
Are there what are their competitive threats? Is there anybody else doing this, or do they have the sort of the battlefield to themselves at this point?
At this point, they're sort of I think they're the most familiar. I think they've done a great job in branding themselves. I think their name, just the fact that they're called Giphy, has helped a lot in making them kind of the synonymous, the sort of number one brand you think of. There's an agent from ICM who I talked to who says, when I think Giphy. But there's another company that's quite big called Tenor. They're a little bit different. They don't think of themselves as entertainment. They're not trying to become a destination where you go to kind of watch GIFs. They're much more pursuing the advertising angle, and they're already doing what I was just talking about in terms of working with brands and saying, and sort of starting to exchange money for surfacing GIFs, along with emotions or searches, so they're aggressively doing this as well. But they sort of, I did talk to someone from Tenor for the article, and I remember him saying, Giphy thinks of themselves as like the YouTube GIFs, and that's not what we think of ourselves as. So I think the entertainment piece is what really distinguishes Giphy at this point.
Well, but in terms of competitive threats, it's also I see the angle of it's sort of like they're infiltrating all of these distribution channels by being the medium of advertising through, they don't have to pay to be on iChat or to be on Facebook because the users are doing it. The users are sharing it. But wouldn't their biggest problem be, if, like we said, Facebook initially didn't even support GIFs. Facebook, in the latest iOS, there's huge ability to add GIFs to messages and things like that. Facebook does the same thing. But what's to stop Facebook from saying, we're just use our GIF engine, or blocking Giphy straight up? Like, isn't that their biggest threat, you would think?
It is in a way, although I talked to them about that because it is. Yeah, exactly. Facebook could absolutely, Facebook's been known, shall we say, to look at other companies and say, hey, we can do that, and we're bigger and faster and we can turn this thing on overnight. I think Giphy's response to that is they're so big, they're so that even if Facebook did that, for example, they are on so many platforms at this point. They're on Twitter, as I said, they're on Tinder, they're on your iPhone. They're so broad and just kind of ubiquitous at this point that even a platform like Facebook turning them off would not destroy them. But I also think, and I did talk to other people about this, and it feels like, why would Facebook do that? I mean, Giphy is, they've built up this brand, they've built up, their user kind of familiarity and comfort. They have this database that's incredible. I mean, they've done so much legwork at this point. They have, everyone is on, every show, Broad City, they're live Gifing the Emmys, they're live Gifing, the Game of Thrones premiere. They're so far ahead. It would take a while, I think, for Facebook to catch up in that way, so I don't think it's necessarily a threat, but it's absolutely, yes, technically it is, but I don't foresee that happening.
Well, I told you about this right before we started recording, but poking the platforms is oftentimes not in your best interest, because you end the piece with, I think it's Alex Chung bragging about how if you Google happy birthday, they're on the first page or number one. It just came out this morning that Google apparently noticed that, because the very next day they've been demoted to the second page. So
yes, putting Giphy in its place. Yeah. I don't know
It's a slightly different issue, I suppose, but when your whole business model is on top of other people's platforms, you're never really in control, I guess.
No. That's absolutely valid. And I think I'm sure Google wants Giphy to know its place for sure. But
I mean, because especially Google. There's another example. Google could get serious about being a GIF search engine and try to compete with them heavily. Well, Nicole, thank you so much. The piece is fantastic. Thanks for coming on to talk about it.
Thank you for having me.
And especially because it seems like it's this up and coming company that could really be a big deal soon, if it's not already.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I learned a lot too. And I've definitely improved my GIF game. So
I need to do that.
Something to work on.
Last night I asked on Facebook, how do I put GIFs on Facebook, and everyone, of course, shamed me and humiliated me. The piece is in Fast Company. It's called "In 6 Seconds, Giphy Could Make Billions." Nicole LaPorte, thanks for coming on the show, and talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Talk to you later.
If this is the first time you're listening to this podcast, please subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice. There's plenty more great internet history where that came from. And if you're a longtime listener, then you know what to do to help us out. Rate and review us on iTunes. Because iTunes gives credit to reviews and ratings, and the more great reviews we get, the more people will discover us. As always, there's more info on our website, www.internethistorypodcast.com. The show's Twitter handle is @NetHistoryPod, and my personal Twitter is @BrianMCC. Thanks for listening.